Hi everyone, Alan here with our Discovering Buddhism class, last for the year. The topic, establishing a daily practice, and this is the second class. So I hope you're well, and I hope you managed to do some study. And during the break, which is quite a long one, from this week up until I think it's the first week of February, we come back. And so it's quite a long break. So it's a good time to just look back at your notes, plenty of notes to look back on. There's no shortage of materials with Discovering Buddhism, lots of written materials. And of course, lots of books that are referred to in the written materials. So the break is a good time to just do some reading if you've got time, and maybe just do some practice. I try and do a little bit of retreat, maybe just a few days when everything's really quiet after Christmas. If you've got that opportunity, it's really good to just spend a few days, maybe a week if you can manage it, to just consolidate your practice and just I'm lucky and I can do a retreat at home because I've got a very quiet place. But anyway, I think His Holiness Dalai Lama said if you can do 2 weeks a year of retreat practice, that's very good if you can manage that. Of course, with our Western busy working life, it's quite difficult sometimes. So that's to consolidate the daily practice that we've been looking at. Daily practice is great and essential, but complete immersion, if you can do it once or twice a year by doing a retreat, intensive retreat every day where you have a little schedule, get up same time, maybe do 4 sessions a day. That's a fairly common schedule for retreat at home. 4 sessions a day of hour and a half, and then you know what's happening day to day. You actually feel quite comfortable, amazing. It is a wonderful opportunity if you can do some intensive practice. And during the break time, of course, you can do some Dharma reading. So just make sure that minimize the contact with the media, the devices, the phones and things. And there's a bit of withdrawal, of course, always from the devices and media onslaught, but it's definitely worthwhile. So let's now just do our normal 5 minutes breathing meditation, mindfulness meditation, to start the session and to get into our mind in the right state. Get comfortable. Finding a good comfortable position on a chair, on a cushion, or on the floor. Lying down, sitting up. We start with bringing our attention into the inner world of our existence, letting go the busy day we've just had, the day where we've been looking outwards at all the external stimuli, the sensory impressions. Now we look inwards to our mind, to our body. How fortunate we are to be able to just do some practice together, spend some time studying the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. Remember, our motivation, not just for our own development and benefit, these practices are, but they're also for the benefit of others. The ultimate Mahayana motivation is we're doing this practice to become like the Buddha, an enlightened being who can perfectly lead other beings out of their suffering to enlightenment, just as he did. Now we just come into our body, make sure we're comfortable, evenly balanced on our chair or the floor. Scanning the body, tension, particularly the upper body around the shoulders. The neck and the head, back's reasonably straight. Eyes can be closed or just gazing ahead, about a body length in front of us. We actually feel the weight of the body on the surface we're on, feeling gravity gradually pulling us into the earth, surrendering to the earth. We can use the out breath to imagine we're letting go. With each out breath, relaxing more deeply. Breathing out all the distractions, the busy thoughts, the busy mind. And now coming into awareness of the breath. The breath is always there, and now it's time to take notice, to watch the breath. To just watch, not control, no judging. Just as a bystander watching the breath. Coming home to the breath, resting our mind on the breath, the movement of the body with the breath. While we're watching the breath, it's our object. Part of the mind is just checking, monitoring. Are we on the breath or have we wandered off? When we're distracted, as probably we will be, just notice when we are distracted. The thought, the sound, just a thought, just a sound. We notice, we let go, and we come back to the breath. Again and again. Just staying with the breath, following the breath all the way into the body, all the way out of the body. Just relax. So just looking at what I sent out yesterday, the handouts, the notes, a few pages of notes on today's topics, and there's question and answers that come with this particular module, this daily practice module, the ones that the DB people supply, and then there is another handout that's just called Establishing a Daily Practice Options. This is also provided by the DB team, and there are 4 options there. So we'll have a look at those. Just looking at last week, just review. Remember, we looked at the idea of a daily practice as being a way of familiarizing ourselves, staying in touch with the Dharma, becoming. Last topic was refuge, if you remember. So if we feel that mentally there's something in the teachings for us, there's some connection with perhaps a teacher, the teachings, the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha, our fellow practitioners. At some stages, a connection. We make a connection with these amazing teachings, and so we want to. Next step is to do some practice, to actually put the teachings into practice. So the daily practice is to just bring us back into the world of Buddhism, the way of thinking. It's a way of thinking which is quite different, really, to probably the way we've been educated. And it takes quite a bit of mental change, a huge amount of mental change. Anything that is to do with changing our mind is going to be slow, and it's going to be gradual. So as all the readings say, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we need to do something repeatedly for it to make an impression on our minds. And so you also need to have a nice, comfortable, quiet space. It's just where we can actually do some practice. So the altar is quite an important idea, where we can sort of, like a place in our house where we can associate with a feeling of peacefulness, quiet contemplation, meditation. So that little place needs to be comfortable. We need to feel that some connection there. So we have some, maybe whatever's nice, flowers, a statue of the Buddha. It can be simple. It can be as simple as complicated as we want. I think I mentioned last week I love lighting, so I have quite complicated, extensive lighting on my altar. Whatever it is that helps us to establish some sort of good mood to want to meditate and do some practice. So, and then there's those prayers, 7 in prayer, the steps. We'll have a bit more look at this this week, what they call the preparatory practices, where we clean the altar, light the lights, make offerings. Offerings don't have to. We can make offerings mentally or physically. Offering bowls are a possibility if you can feel a connection with offering bowls, 7 offering bowls like the ones you've seen at Vajra Institute, and you fill them with water, and that represents offerings of this 7 substances: water, food, flowers, music, etc. So, so these are things that bring us into a session. So we'll come back particularly to what His Holiness said about the the actual session. These preliminary things are to get us in the mood and get us in the right state of mind. And then there's the actual, what we actually do in the session. So we need to have a bit more look at that this week. So let's just have a quick look at perhaps the question and answers. Some of the, I think we've covered a lot of it, but perhaps some of them we'll cover today. So just look at question and answers. I think you don't need to go through them in detail if you've got them there. The first one is, what are the 6 preparatory practices? Very straightforward. They're there. These are just what I mentioned, these practices that lead us into a session. The 7 limbs, what are they? That's part of the preparatory practices. Prostrations, offerings, confessions, rejoicing. These are things that soften the mind and get our mind in a receptive state of mind. How do you know what meditations do instructing your daily practice? Okay, so this is question 3 there. So remember last week, His Holiness said it's very good to do a glance meditation of the whole of the Lam Rim. So glance meditation is just reminding ourselves of the important points of the teachings. And some of the prayers that you come with this module, so the Shakyamuni Buddha practice, the daily practice that Lama Zopa recommends, that I sent you last week, they actually have this brief outline. Really, it's just on a page, basically, where they just go through the different levels of practice. First one, remember, is to just set up the wish to have a favourable rebirth. And so we do actions that increase our positive merit, and we avoid actions that will cause suffering in our life, because we want a favourable rebirth where we can continue our practice. The next level is that rebirth is always problematic, because it's suffering. If we're not a liberated being, we're going to suffer in the next rebirth, even if it is a human rebirth. So we want to be liberated completely from all rebirth, all suffering. And this is the second level of practice. And then the third level is to bring in the Mahayana motivation. We want to be liberated, but not just for our own self. We've got to think about other beings who are also in our same situation. They all need help. And just like the Buddha himself, Shakyamuni Buddha, became aware of the suffering of all beings. And so the only way he can help in a meaningful way is to become a fully enlightened being, where he can see the needs of each individual sentient being and guide them to enlightenment. So these different, although there's quite a lot of substance to the actual prayers, we say them very quickly in the morning. And so the more we say them and the more we study the teachings, we can connect the actual background to the prayers in our mind. They're not just words, but they mean something. So, of course, this takes time to become more and more familiar with the teachings. So just on question 3 there, how to structure a meditation session, they mentioned Pabonka's text, How to Meditate on the Stages of the Path. So in case you haven't noticed, at the end of the readings, there's an extract of that very text, How to Meditate on the Stages of the Path, by the great Tibetan yogi Pabonka, who was alive last century, in the early part of the 20th century, and gave teachings in Tibet. And the actual text is called Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. So the important parts of, or some extracts of that text, is contained at the end of the readings. And they're, of course, profound. And they're divided into different possible meditations that you could do in any one day or any session. So it's on impermanence. It's got exactly what you meditate on impermanence, basically in a page or two. And things like compassion there, things like the importance of emptiness, the nature of existence. It's all very concisely set out. So that's a good place to look for a guided meditation on a particular topic. So after we do the glance meditation, which covers the broad structure of what we call the Lam Rim, we should focus on one particular bit of it, even if it's only for a few minutes. If we may only have 5 or 10 minutes, but we can say either for this day or for this week, we'll focus on, say, the appreciating our human life, that we've got a human rebirth, and we'll just go through those teachings, that aspect of the Lam Rim, precious human rebirth. So plenty of information in Pabonka's teachings, but the other one is How to Meditate by Kathleen MacDonald. So this is not so much a teaching, it's just guided meditations, a few pages on each of the important Lam Rim topics. So I mentioned that book many times. I'm sure you've got that one, or you've got access to it. How to Meditate. Another one I put in the reading list is called Lam Rim Meditations by Thupten Chodron, Venerable. That they're all very good. They really cover the same area as how to meditate. Main activities to overcome obstacles in practice. Just looking at the questions again. Question 4. Purification, merit, accumulating merit, and requests. This is 3 of the important 7 limb prayer. Purification, and this is confessing our wrongdoings. Lama Zopa, you'll notice, says in all his recommended daily meditations that we do some purification. He favors prostrations, but there's also Vajrasattva practice. In those 4 guided or 4 suggested daily meditations that I sent you yesterday, daily practice option 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you've got different options for purification, different options for accumulating merit, and different options for making requests. Pardon the phone, it will go away in a minute. So these are the things that lead us into our session: purification and to help dispel obstacles. So just looking at the other questions, activities, between sessions. Remember last week we looked at Kendall, who is transcript of her teachings on this topic you've got, says how important it is to keep mindfulness outside the session. So we need to go to work, we need to relate to the outside world. But if we can be mindful and during our activities in the outside world, our daily life, this can help enormously, so that we can bring some of that wisdom, compassion that we generate in the daily session, the daily practice in the morning, into our daily life. On that, terrific teachings were given yesterday, whether you've been watching Geshe Zopa's teachings on YouTube. He's been giving Geshe Zopa, very great young monk who used to be Lama Zopa's attendant and the attendant to Geshe Lama Konchok, very incredibly high Lama. He's living in Australia and teaches online because of our pandemics restrictions every Sunday afternoon. He's teaching, I think it's from Perth that he's actually teaching. It doesn't really matter where he is, but I think it's 4 o'clock every Sunday afternoon. he's been giving these teachings for a couple of hours. Yesterday was exactly on a daily practice. He spent almost a whole 2 hours on how to structure a daily practice. So if you've got the opportunity to actually get that, it's on YouTube, of course. You can get it and you can replay it. And it's if you just do a search for Geshe Tenzin Zopa or just Geshe Zopa, his series of talks. He's got many teachings on the YouTube. A series of talks will come up as being his. If you look at the ones that are the most recent, they're all on the Lam Rim. And yesterday's, if you can find that one by date, what's that? That's the 13th, yesterday, 13th of December. It's right on the topic we're doing at the moment, daily practice. And he stresses very much keeping mindfulness during the day, between sessions. And he spends a lot of time talking about importance of our speech, particularly if we're, at work or whatever, to be careful not to let anger or impatience or any of the negative emotions predominate in our speech. A kind of mindfulness before we say something we might regret later. So this is something that he stresses and makes very clear. And then, of course, Kendall has this lovely idea of rose-coloured, Lam Rim-coloured glasses. So what we've studied that day or that week, we look at the world through that. Okay, so we can look at the world. We're doing precious human rebirth. How fortunate we are to have this body born in such a great place for practicing Dharma. You can remember that as you deal with the outside world. All right, so of course, we're on the questions at the moment. So we're finished with that, finished with the questions and answers. They're all there for you to look at. Quick look at these Lam Rim meditations, establishing a daily practice options. That's these are prepared by the FMT Education Department on the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So Lama Zopa, our spiritual director or head, the head of this organisation, FPMT, head of our centres, have given these suggested practice options. So you can see some of them involve mantras, particularly on Mani Padme Hum, the importance, that's the Chen Resik mantra, the Medicine Buddha mantra, another good one. And it's actually quite minimalist what he's saying. He's respecting that in the West most people won't have a lot of time to do daily practice, but he's got option 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the fullest. Option 4 is the one that probably involves the most time. So, and in that, he mentions morning activities section of Essential Buddhist Prayers. But this is another, Essential Buddhist Prayers is the book that you've probably seen if you've gone to VI. It's the gold-covered book. And it's got things, a section called Morning Activities, which are specifically practices to do in our daily session in the morning. And things Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche gives guidance for what we should think when we first wake up in the morning, before we even get out of bed. The very first thing. First thing, he says, should be to rejoice that we're still alive, and as much as possible, the coming day, make our lives meaningful for others, devote ourselves to others. This is compassion, thinking less about ourselves, more about others. So this is the first thing, and then goes on to elaborate a little bit more. So if you've, that book is quite a big, thick book, but again, available in digital form from the FPMT website, the FPMT shop. What's it called? Not the FPMT shop. Anyway, if you Google FPMT shop, you end up there with all these texts and prayers available, very cheap to download. So another one, I just thought I'd mention this because it's not been mentioned so far in any of the readings. If, as you progress, you decide to have a highest Yoga Tantra initiation, if you perhaps meet up with Lama Zopa Rinpoche or a Lama who gives the highest Tantra initiation, so it could be Vajrayogini, Yamantaka, all the different deities, could be whatever. And that once you have a highest Tantra initiation, you have a commitment to say what is called the six-session Guru Yoga practice, six-session Guru Yoga, which covers a lot of these daily practices that we've been talking about. So that particular six-session Guru Yoga practice is one we must do every day of our lives. Once we have a highest Yoga Tantra initiation, we make a commitment to do the six-session Guru Yoga in morning and evening. There's a long version and a short version. So that covers a very large amount of what these daily practices cover. I just thought I'd mention that. In case some of you might have had a highest Yoga Tantra initiation, you might be doing the six-session Guru Yoga. So the Sutra of Golden Light is one of a very great sutra that you can, again, also purchase or download. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche stresses that how important that sutra is. It's got some wonderful stories in it. And it's said by even just hearing the name of the Sutra of Golden Light, has an unbelievable effect on the mind. Very powerful sutra. That's another one. It's quite a long sutra, but you can just do maybe a page or two a day, which is what Lama suggests as a good practice. It doesn't say you have to, but if you've got time. Let's now look at what we've got on the menu for today. It's basically finishing off what His Holiness advice is on daily practice. I've just condensed it in a few points from that book that I mentioned, Practicing the Path. I've forgotten exactly what it's called because there's 5 volumes in that series. So I've got in the notes there, page 1 of the notes, the preparation for the session. So His Holiness just re-emphasizes those preparation, which we don't need to go through again. And then the actual practice. So the actual practice, exactly what Prabhupada recommends, that we do a scan meditation on the whole Lamrim, and then we look at particular aspects of the Lamrim using reasoning and logic. So this is analytical meditation. This is the type of meditation where we look at things from a reasoning point of view, using logic, using our capacity as human beings to use reasoning and examples, and to actually see an argument, follow a line of reasoning and argument. So as His Holiness says, when you say, if you're looking at something, we're going to do equanimity at the end of the section, the importance of the mind seeing all sentient beings as equally deserving our compassion, equanimity. So if we're choosing that as a Lamrim topic, we use the fact that we start off with how we normally regard people as either someone who's helping, someone who's harming, or someone who's completely neutral. And our attitude to each is related to whether they help, we like them, whether they harm, we don't like them, and whether they're neutral, no thoughts at all, we're neutral. So we start off with that, and then we look at the reasoning behind that. Is that a valid way of looking at other beings? How permanent is the helper? Why is the person that we like someone we like? Because they do something for us. We're at the center of the universe. People who help us, we like. Those who don't help us, we don't like. So we're looking at how reasonable this is, this attitude, and we're looking at the reasons against how this is not actually going to help us, this sort of attitude. So when we get to a conclusion, say, oh, this reasoning, all beings like us, for example, they all suffer, and they all don't want to suffer. What an incredible common humanity we have with all beings, whether we're friends, enemy, or stranger. So when we reach a conclusion like that, Solomon says, we one-pointedly stay with that, using our calm abiding faculty in our mind. When we do our mindfulness practice, that capacity to stay on a particular point or feeling or realization, to stay with that as long as we can. Focus your mind one-pointedly on the meaning of the experience, to quote His Holiness. And then through the whole session, on the Lamrim session, he says, always keep in the background the method and wisdom aspects of the path. So remember, the method of wisdom is compassion, putting others before self, and wisdom, nothing exists as it appears to our mind as it is now. So this is the idea that everything has a dependent nature, even though it appears to be very solid, existing from its own side out there. It's actually dependent on causes and conditions and has no independent existence on its own. So these two, wisdom and emptiness, he says, keep these in mind, perhaps either during or at the end or before our session, our meditation session, the practice. And then he's got a very nice visualization. He says, at the end of the session, imagine Shakyamuni Buddha on the crown of our head and representing all the wisdom of the teachings that we've just been studying, dissolving into our crown down to the heart. And we're actually integrating the Buddha's wisdom with our own mind. They become inseparable. So he says this makes it very powerful. So he says, it may feel that Lamrim meditation using the reasoning mind is not quite as peaceful and calm as calm abiding, which is the mindfulness practice, using the breath or one object, shamatha practice. But he says it's very important. We need shamatha to calm the mind, but he says don't think that that's because it feels calm, and we can be quite intoxicating, the idea of this mind that is completely still and calm. We still need to move on and study the Dharma using our analytical faculties, reasoning and logic. Right? So all the Mahayana teachers say this. Lama Zopa always mentions that the Lamrim, studying the Lamrim with reasoning and logic is the main practice. He says that shamatha is important because we need to be able to focus the mind, sharpen it, but we only need the shamatha so that we can actually study the Lamrim more effectively. Then dedication, His Holiness says it's very important at the end of each session to dedicate. And so there's quite a lot of teachings on dedication. Dedication particularly is important to help that positive imprint on our minds to be protected and from negative states of mind, particularly anger. It's said that anger can burn up, in a few milliseconds, all our merit if we haven't dedicated. So the dedication is really important. If we dedicate strongly towards our objective, which is full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings in the Mahayana practice, or the lesser objective for perfect human rebirth, this is Dharma practice, or the perfect or liberation from all suffering. So these objectives are all Dharma objectives. If we dedicate to that all the merit we've got from that session, it's protected. It won't be burnt up by any moments of anger later on. So he expresses this, His Holiness expresses this very beautifully. It increases, seal the dedication by reflecting that you, the object and the action itself, what we're meditating on, and our activity of meditation are all empty from existing from their own side. They exist dependently. Okay, so we remember wisdom realizing emptiness when we're dedicating, and this increases our understanding of how emptiness and dependent arising prevents us from becoming arrogant. Okay, so and then he stresses the importance of mindfulness during the sessions. So even when we're eating, he says, moderation in food and sleep, guarding the sense stores, acting with introspective awareness while engaging in daily activities. Just mentioned that. And for more on that, see Geshe Zopa's teachings yesterday. Also, Lama Zopa's teachings in the readings are excellent on that. Basically, he says the strongest practice is keeping the compassion bodhicitta in our mind, in our hearts. Time's running out, so let's have a quick look at what Kendall says about doubt. So this is healthy doubt. There's doubts that's said to be quite unhealthy if we have doubts about things that we've already committed. If we take refuge and then we doubt whether we should have, or we make an offering to our guru or to a worthy cause, and then we doubt whether we should have done that. But this is not helpful doubt. But healthy doubt, positive doubt, is where we debate with ourselves. Okay, so this is all part of the monastic upbringing of Tibetan monks in Tibet, was to debate hours and hours every day in the courtyard what they'd actually studied in class that day. So by somebody asking, there's like a devil's advocate saying, why should we regard all sentient beings as our mothers? What's the reason? And then the person who's responding has to give the reasons. The other person is trying to sort of knock holes in their argument. So this sort of doubt, it's not really doubt, it's just looking at reasoning and being able to mount an argument, is very healthy, very good, and it will consolidate our practice. So she gives examples of our Buddha's potential. How do we know? You say that we've got Buddha potential. What's the reason for that? What are the reasons in the teaching? So we've got Buddha potential. Why? How can we become Buddha? Buddha's was a special person. So no, we look at Buddha's life story. Buddha was not always a Buddha. He was an ordinary person like us with faults. He practiced, he purified his mind over many lifetimes and became Buddha. So then he gives the teachings that we all have Buddha potential, even non-human beings, even animals, and beings in other realms have Buddha potential. So we look at these background arguments, and so that we're able to if our mind does start saying, well, what is this, all this Buddhist stuff, is it really, think about it, is it really true? And if we've actually raised the issues and gone through the reasoning, then we can, when these doubts, or if we hear this, if somebody else questions us or says, oh, that's all a lot of rubbish, we've got some self-confidence that we've actually sorted that out using reasoning. If you've been watching some of His Highness's teachings for this year, he's been giving lots of teachings this year. One of the things he said repeatedly is how the Mahayana Buddhists, the Tibetan, what he calls the Nalanda tradition, which is the Tibetan teachings based on the great Nalanda Indian masters, those who studied and taught at the Nalanda Institute in India. These great masters like Shantideva, Nagarjuna, and so on. He says the Mahayanas are very good at debating and using reasoning. And he even says, compared to the Theravadins, he said if the Theravadins, they learn all the sutra texts. So this is a little bit of competition in a very kind way. He says if the Theravadins are questioned in a strong debate, they tend not to have all the arguments to throw back at the questioner. Whereas the Mahayana Tibetan Buddhists, they've actually been debating and debating and debating using reason and logic, and they can actually they can defeat somebody who's arguing against their beliefs. They can defeat strongly because they're used to that. So it is true that the Mahayana tradition, the Tibetan Mahayana tradition, has huge emphasis, particularly the Gelugpa tradition, the Gelugpa school of reasoning, analytical meditation, debate. So this is basically the point of Kendall saying, think about why we should think about all sentient beings being our mothers. That's the compassionate mind. Why is that? How is that possible that all sentient beings are being our mothers? So then we bring to mind what is mind? The mind having this without beginning or end, the possibility of past life, reincarnation. And so if we've worked through the reasoning of how feasible it is that there are past lives, how logical it is, then we can come to a conclusion. Our faith is based on reasoning, not just on blind faith, not just because somebody said so. Why is he the most precious person? So when we're going to do this equanimity meditation in a minute. So we go through the reasoning of why we should respect the enemy, even though it goes counterintuitive to worldly thinking. There's actually very compelling reasons as to why that's beneficial for us and to the other person. And of course, how nothing exists as it appears because of dependent arising. So this is this idea of debating and raising doubts, healthy doubts, is very good for our practice. And it's something we can do in our session, our regular daily session, or probably my way of thinking, when we're out in the world, you're thinking about impermanence, and things are happening. We're watching impermanence. We're watching how the coronavirus has actually changed everything within a few months, how the world's been turned upside down. Impermanence is teaching that. They're saying this is samsara. Things can just be undermined and changed. There's no security, no comfort in samsara. So we can use the worldly phenomena to reinforce our practice. So just looking at the rest of the notes, what I've done is just attach something about mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice, we only just do a few minutes every session to start the session for DB. If you get the chance, you can come to many of the sessions a week. We have probably 4 or 5 different drop-in meditation sessions at VI every week, where at least half of those sessions are based on mindfulness meditation practice, usually breath meditation, but there are other different types. There's also watching the thoughts, using the thoughts of the consciousness as the object. You can use sound, and part of mindfulness meditation is alertness, what they call introspective awareness, watching the mind, and monitoring, like being the security guard, quality control. Are you actually doing this mindful practice, or are you at the moment in a different time or place? You're sitting there, you're breathing, but your mind is not on the breath, it's out doing something that you did yesterday or going to do tomorrow. So that's introspection, and we use alertness to spy and check on what we're doing. That's all part of mindfulness breathing. Also, essential in mindfulness to make it a virtuous practice is to set motivation, that we're not doing it just for our own benefit. So motivation will convert mindfulness from a neutral practice. The example is often given of you can be doing something mindfully that's negative, thinking of somebody, they use the example of robbing a bank, how careful you have to be not to set off the alarm, total mindfulness, totally aware of every action you're doing. So the mindfulness itself is not virtuous or non-virtuous. The meditation will make it a Dharma practice by setting a virtuous motivation. Then, so just all those sessions at VI. There's three of us teaching mindfulness practice. Wai Chong, I think he does 2 a week, and Venerable Daiki and me. I think there's probably 5 sessions between us, and you can actually on YouTube watch them later. So it's good to do some mindfulness practice with or without the guided meditation. It's good to actually have a teacher for a while, and then maybe you can do it on your own for a while. So a few notes there about mindfulness meditation, which is great to integrate with your practice. And then I've got something on equanimity practice. Equanimity practice is just an example of one of the Lamrim topics that we can use in our daily practice. Just the word equanimity, usually it refers to equal attitudes to all beings, as being friend, enemy, and stranger, trying to level those distinctions into concern for all beings equally. The other meaning of equanimity is quiet mind, a mind that is just calm, like the surface of a flat ocean without the waves. That, and just to quote the saying from one of the Theravadan sutras, I'm just reading from the note, as a solid mass of rock is not stirred by the wind, so a sage is not moved by praise or blame. As a deep lake is clear and undisturbed, a sage becomes clear upon hearing the Dharma, etc. So that's the other meaning of equanimity. It's completely different, not completely different, but it's just talking about that state of mind, the calm state of mind that is quiet and therefore receptive and deep. This is what shamatha practice is all about, shamatha. The ability to stay with a deep sense of peace in the face of life's challenges. It arises primarily through insight into reality. So then the second meaning of equanimity is the one that we're going to look at now, and I think we might just go straight to that practice. equanimity meditation. So this equanimity practice is based probably generally on Kathleen MacDonald's practice in how to meditate, but it's also taking parts from Lama Zopa's teachings on equanimity and other books I've read. Let's get my equanimity notes. Excuse me while thought I had a drink here, but it's gone. Never mind. So this is equanimity practice. Basically, remember the two wings of the bird to enlightenment. The two wings of the bird to fly us to enlightenment is compassion and wisdom. Wisdom realizing emptiness, compassion for all being. The first step of compassion, first step towards developing it, is developing equanimity, evenness of mind to all beings, looking at all beings without discrimination. So sometimes a nice way of describing it is considering our shared humanity with other beings. So shared humanity, it makes us feel equal towards other human beings, but there's also shared sentient being humanity where we're also equal to non-human beings like animals and other beings in other realms. So it helps develop a sense of connection. The first Panchen Lama says this is one point to help us to feel this connection of humanity to other beings. Quote, "As for suffering, I don't wish even the slightest. As for happiness, I'm never satisfied. In this, there is no difference between others and me. Bless me so that I may take joy in others' happiness." So this is the first step in equanimity meditation. First, recognizing that just like ourselves, all other beings want happiness. They don't want the slightest bit of suffering. Probably every time His Holiness gives a speech, he starts off with that. It's common wish to be happy. So then, in the equanimity practice, we bring to mind someone who we regard as a friend. Better to have it as a friend, not a relative. Reasons later, obvious later. Close friends, we bring to mind somebody who's an enemy, not necessarily an enemy, someone who makes us feel uncomfortable. Because we don't usually, we may not think we've got any enemy, but then there's someone says something and that can trigger dislike. So an enemy or someone who's difficult for us, difficult to be with, someone who makes us feel uncomfortable. And a stranger, somebody who we see every day in the street, could be in a crowd, no particular feelings one way or the other, no attachment or aversion. So first thing we start off is just feeling, when each of those people come to mind, how we react, first reaction, and then we go back over each one and to analyze, why is the friend a friend? How reasonable is it to cling and hold that person as being more important than the stranger, for example? And we do the same with the enemy. Why we reject them? What's going on there? It's usually because they're not helping us, and we're the centre of the universe. If they don't help us, we don't like them. We look at other arguments against why that's not a good way of attitude to have to the enemy. And then we look at the stranger. Remember, 99.9% of all beings are strangers. Why should we just ignore them? We've got this common humanity. So that's basically is leveling the playing field and having this equanimous mind. So get comfortable and we'll do the practice for probably about 15 minutes. I'll lead you through it. Find a comfortable position. We always begin with a few moments of breath meditation, mindfulness meditation. Calm the mind. So we begin our practice on equanimity meditation by starting with bringing to mind 3 people. The first one is a friend, someone we like, we feel very close to, we feel we can be ourselves to that person, and just note the feeling that arise, our first reaction when that close friend comes into our mind. The warm feelings, how easy it is to feel close to that person. How easy it is to feel a connection, a commonality. Notice that feeling, remember it, effortless warmth, concern, affection. Wanting that person to have only happiness and not suffer, just like me. Now, we replace that person with the opposite sort of person, someone who we feel uncomfortable with, we dislike, perhaps we even regard as an enemy. Just that first reaction when that person comes to mind. Notice the first reaction. No need to use reasoning, just the feeling. Perhaps it's a relative. Perhaps it's someone who's harmed us, said or done something that has hurt us. Perhaps it's somebody who we have hurt. Perhaps it's someone who we just don't like and we don't know why. No reason. Notice the feelings, uncomfortable. Don't suppress the feelings, allow them to arise. Don't get into a debate or just note the feeling. Next, we bring to mind a stranger. Stranger could be someone in that crowd we see at the bus stop, the supermarket, walking down the street, people at work you've never spoken to, the person in the cafe, in the library, perhaps a neighbour who we just have never spoken to and just see. Now notice the neutral feelings. What's the feeling there? that person has neither helped us or harmed us. There's no reason to either like or dislike that person. Our feelings are neutral. We don't give much thought to whether they're happy or not happy. Okay, now we come back to the person who we like, the warm, feeling person. We're going to look at the basis of our attitude, why we have these feelings of closeness, distance, and neutrality for each person. That person, how long has they been our friend? Not always. Person was once a stranger. Recognize that that person has not always been our friend. It's not a permanent situation. It exists from its own side. Not a permanent and changing friend. Thinking whether that person could ever not be a friend. If we think that's impossible, think of our old friends that we are no longer close to. Those persons at a time were our close friends, perhaps friends in childhood we saw every day. Now we have no contact. Looking at our close friends, noticing that some are no longer close, or maybe they've fallen away from us. Maybe they became enemies. We no longer see them. Something happened. The close friend changed. Recognize that that person who we regard as the close friend is not intrinsically a close friend. Once they weren't a close friend. It is possible for that close friend to change and become someone we're not particularly interested in, or even an enemy. Look at the past, what's happened in the past. They're other friends. The impermanent changing nature of friendship. That's what we contemplate. Did that person become our friend because they did something to us that we liked? They say things to us that we like, they compliment us, they make us feel good, important, they boost our morale. Is it really about us that we like that person? They share our way of thinking, our interests. They fit in with me, myself. They help me. I like them. They help me. Just looking honestly at how much that is important in deciding whether they're close friends. Is it about me? Partly or fully about me or not? use reasoning, come to a conclusion. Next, we bring to mind the enemy, the difficult one, the one who is hard to even think about. Perhaps think just briefly why this person, if there are any reason, makes us feel uncomfortable. Did they harm us? Did they say words that hurt us? Perhaps there's someone we're competing with at work or some other way. Perhaps even an ex-partner, ex-husband or wife. Then use reasoning to see this person in a different light. People who we are uncomfortable with are loved by other beings. There's someone in the world who thinks that person is very, very nice, has warm feelings, perhaps even as their best friend. If that's possible, there is no intrinsic, difficult person, intrinsic enemy. It's through our mind that we make that person the enemy. Another way is to think that that person suddenly says or does something to help us, is very kind to us. Out of the blue, unexpectedly, they help us. How would that change our feelings towards that person? Perhaps this has happened. Think of an example if you can. An enemy or a difficult person who becomes a friend. Their action changes. They help us. Also, bear in mind that just like ourselves, this difficult person wants happiness just like us and wants to avoid all suffering just like us. That common humanity we have in common with that person. They have the same aspirations of me. They want to make the best of their lives. They want to have happiness. Another aspect is all the Buddha's teachings teach us that this person helps us to develop patience and positive qualities. The difficult person gives us the opportunity to practice patience, non-anger. Without them, we can't make any progress on the path to enlightenment. Think of this. If everyone's nice to us, how can we develop forbearance, patience? Impossible. No enemy, no difficult one, no enlightenment, no progress on the path. Think of this reasoning, come to a conclusion. As Lama Zopa says, the enemy is the most precious of all people in our life. Think of the reasons. Completely non-worldly attitude, all very different from common people's attitude. Now we come to the stranger. The person we have either liked, no particular like or dislike. Is this because they've neither helped us or harmed us? No special relationship. No special thoughts given to that person. No. It's true that that person, like all beings like ourselves, wants happiness, doesn't want suffering. The next point is we are one. Our friends are very limited. The strangers are the bulk. The most people in the universe are strangers. Which is more important? Ourselves, a small number of friends, or the strangers. Remember, they, like friends and enemies, are trying to make the most of their lives, trying to be happy. Just like me. Think of those billions and billions of beings who we rarely think about. All wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. Now bring to mind all three, representing all three groups of people, the friend, the warm ones, the enemy, difficult ones, and the strangers, all representing all sentient beings. Friend, enemy, and stranger are just categories that we put from our own side. There's no intrinsic friend, no intrinsic enemy, or no intrinsic stranger. They're all beings wanting happiness, experience suffering just like us, feel that common humanity, common connection. How trivial our classifications are, friend, enemy, and stranger. All beings are equally deserving of our attention, our concern, and our loving kindness, our compassion. Stay with that thought. They all have Buddha potential. They all have the potential to develop their mind and obtain ultimate compassion and wisdom, as we do. So the conclusion is all beings, including those we regard as friend, enemy, and strangers, like us, want happiness, don't want suffering. They all have Buddha potential, like us, become fully enlightened beings. They all have the right to be happy, the right to progress along the path to enlightenment. May you, all beings, have happiness, be free of suffering, and live in peace and health, have good health, live in peace and have happiness. Wishing all these beings well. Wishing them happiness. Equanimity is the pathway to developing great compassion. Just as all the Buddhas developed great compassion. All our teachers develop great compassion. So we too must develop equanimity and great compassion to all beings. Finally, we'll dedicate any positive merit from this particular meditation, today's teachings, today's practice, today's meditation, using Lama Zopa's special dedication during the coronavirus. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all the sickness, without exception, of transmigrating beings never occur again. Due to the merits of 3 times collected by me, numberless Buddhas, numberless sentient beings, may all wars, sickness, famine, torture, poverty, economic problems of the world, and all dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately, and may perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and lives. May the Buddha Dharma last for a long time, and may sentient beings in this world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible, dedicating to that. Okay, so thanks so much for being there. Hope you have a wonderful Christmas, New Year, and peaceful and happy New Year. Much healthier one in the world than we've had this year. And look forward to seeing you when we start again next year, hopefully face-to-face. I think that's the plan, all going well. Thank you, Julia. And we'll get together in February. All right. Happy study, happy meditation. Thank you.